Welcome to Out with Dan, the podcast that spotlights and examines the voices of LGBTQ+ authors, characters, and our allies. Together, we lift our voices and we tell our stories. I'm Dan White. Join me as I chat with this week's author. Hello and welcome back to Out with Dan. Today I'm excited to talk to another Dan, Dan Bronson. Dan is a screenwriter, a former professor, and an author. Welcome, Dan.
Well, thank you. Great to be here.
It's good to have you here. We're going to eventually talk about Shout at the Devil, Dan's second book in the Jack Shannon series. I had a little brain fart there for a minute. Sorry about that. So let's start a little bit with you were a professor at DePaul University. You taught English, is that right?
Yes, I taught English, Shakespeare, American Lit, creative writing, and film. Even though I'd never had a course in film myself, I was in love with the movies from the age of consciousness. And we had something called winter term. It took place between the two main semesters, and you were allowed to teach anything you wanted to, whether you had any qualifications whatsoever. And I chose film. Well, ordinarily, you would get anywhere from 5 to 10 students in one of these winter term courses. I got 125.
Good heavens.
Well, the interest was really there. And I used that to talk my very conservative colleagues into bringing that course into the regular curriculum. And from there, I built the beginnings of a film program. I did a seminar in Hitchcock and Wells. I got internships for my students at the Directors Guild, 2,000 miles away. I got a grant from the Academy to bring a director to campus, Lamont Johnson, probably best known for The Execution of Private Slovic with Marty Sheen. And we hit it off. I put him on the rack for 3 days. I mean, I had this guy going from 9 in the morning till 3 in the and the next morning, and everything that could go wrong threatened to go wrong, culminating with the big climax of the Lamont Johnson Film Festival. He had just directed a very successful film called One on One with Robbie Benson, a basketball movie, with G.D. Spradlin as the coach. I mean, oh God, what an actor! At any rate, that was to be the culmination of the Lamont Johnson Film Festival. We were opening our new Performing Arts Center with this. We had 1,000 people scheduled to come, and the day before the big event, I got a call from Warner Brothers saying, sorry, we couldn't get the union clearances on the film. We can't send it to you.
Oh, no.
Not good. So,
no.
Okay. I got on the phone to my friend, whom I'd actually never met, at the Directors Guild. And lo and behold, the next day, I went to the Indianapolis airport and picked up these big, heavy cans of film. And it was at that point, Lamont, who had been started his life as a radio actor in New York, said, Dan, come to Hollywood. I see you as a successful producer in 5 years. Well, I got a grant from the Lilly Endowment to support me in an internship sponsored by George Seaton, the director of The Country Girl, Miracle on 34th Street. And, George was Kris Kringle. Oh, what a wonderful, wonderful man. And I got there. He was dying, and he turned me over to this guy. His name was Al Dorskin. He was the guy who bought the Universal lot for what's his name, the head of the company. At any rate, he gave me a pass to the studio and said, "You're on your own, kid." So
wow.
I went around. I introduced myself to Verna Field, the editor of Jaws, Steven Spielberg's mentor. in whose swimming pool one of the key scenes of Jaw was shot. And she was known as Mother Cutter. She took me under her wing. She she got me assigned to a Gil Cates film. I Never Sang for My Father, Summer Wishes, Winter Dreams. This, unfortunately, was The Last Married Couple in America. Not a very good film, but I was there from pre-production through production through post, and that's how I got to know the movies. Oh, and the other thing is she got me an introduction to the story editor, and uh, after we really got to know each other, he offered me a job, uh, which I accepted, resigned my tenured professorship, only to find there was something called the Story Honest Guild that wouldn't let me accept the job I'd been offered because you had to be a member of the guild to hold a job, but you had to hold a job to be a member of the guild.
Yeah,
So I,
it's a rotating thing, isn't it?
I did well. I went 4.5 months basically homeless, house sitting, uh, living on an article I wrote for a current biography about Marty Ritt, whom I later met and found that mine was his favorite of anything that had ever been written about him. But
I love
literally, I was living on $10 a week, peanut butter and bananas, until I finally talked my way in. So that's the story of the move from the academic world to the the very different world of Hollywood.
Well, it is a very different world, and I think Dan, you've sort of given the audience an idea of what it is like to have a fairy tale Hollywood beginning, because it could have gone wrong at any step of the way. Someone might have said, "Oh, yeah, we don't need you," or what have you. Things happen. You got turned down by the guild to begin with, and those things happen. So but then also exciting things happened. So you were a story analyst for several different studios. What does a story analyst do?
Well, every studio has a creative group. These are vice presidents production. They're the ones to whom projects are submitted, screenplays are submitted. They're the ones who make recommendations ultimately as to which movies get made and which don't. And what happens is an agent will call up an executive in the creative group and say, "I've got this great new script for you," and the executive will say, "Send it over." And then depending on how important the agent is, I'll get back to you in a month, or I'll read it tonight and get back to you tomorrow. And what he does is send it. He never even looks at it. He sends it off to the story department, where it is assigned to a story analyst, and the analyst will read it, write about a one-page synopsis, uh, give it a box score for plot, structure, characterization, dialogue, and then make a recommendation, reject, uh, recommend, or consider. Um, and then the executive will glance at it, get the submitter on the phone, and say, "Well, I took a look at your script," and then he's just reading from your notes. And this is the way it works. I mean, they never ever ever read unless something comes through that gets highest recommendation and catches their fancy. Then they bring it to the creative group, and they actually all of them read it and vote as to whether or not they might want to go ahead and make a bid on this. Now, I once gave a talk at UCLA with Honcho in the Writers Guild, a big time writer, and I I spoke first, and he followed up, and he said, "Well, you know what Dan says is true for most writers." He said, "But some of us reach a point in our career where we can demand that the executive read the script himself." This is why just last week I sent something over to Tom at Universal, and he got back to me the very next day. And I want you to know, I very graciously did not share with him or with the audience the fact that I had read his script. And it was really I who had gotten back to him the very next day. So that's how it works. That's what a
Yeah,
reader does.
and of course, I think that anybody who's been in a hierarchy of business understands that most every business works that way, especially a large one. A studio, Hollywood studio is enormous. It is an enormous collection of people, and no one person can do everything. It's just not a possibility.
Yeah.
I think it, like in most large corporations, same thing. You have hierarchies of people who make the ultimate decision, but you have people who make recommendations along the way. And I think also, I can imagine if you're the story analyst and you get a piece of garbage, you've really saved that executive a lot of time because they're not going to be interested in it.
Well, most of them are garbage. It's amazing. We only accept, I say we, I'm no longer part of the studio, but the studios only accept screenplays from established producers and registered agents. They can't afford to take scripts in off the street because there's always a threat of a plagiarism suit.
Sure.
So, as a matter of fact, I had to write the response letter that we used whenever something like that came in, just saying we're returning this unopened, we can't look at it, and explain why. Now, it can work other ways. For example, I had a friend who was part of he was a creative executive and a low-level member of the creative group at Paramount, had moved on and was trying to establish himself as a writer. Well, he was working with a low-level mafiosa on his autobiography, and in the course of that, Tom, who had been a really huge fan of Godfather 1 and 2, found out what the mafia had been up to in the years following those covered by Godfather 1 and 2. And on the basis of that, he had written a treatment. And he called me up and he said, look, I want to submit this to Don Steele, who was head of production at that time. And but I want you to look at it first and tell me if it needs any work. Well, I read it and I flipped over it. I mean, he got all the beats of the Godfather movies right. He got the structure right. He got everything right. And I called him. I said, this is great, but you're not giving it to Don. You're giving it to me. I said, I will set it up. I'm young. I'm hungry. I promise you I will set it up. Well, I didn't know whether I could or not. But what I did, I went first to Don Steele, who was one tough customer, and sold her on the idea. And then I went to each of the other members of the creative group and sold them individually on the idea. And it came before it went into weekend read. On Friday, you get a backpack full of screenplays to carry home if you're a member of the creative group. And then you read them over the weekend and you all get together on Monday to see if there's anything that's worth pursuing. Well, we get to this Godfather's 3 treatment, and we go around the room. Don says yes, and everyone, the dominoes all fall until we get around to Ned Tannen, who is the executive over Don. And Ned says, I don't like it. It's too expensive. He says, you can't have anyone but Al Pacino. I still haven't made back my, let's see. I still haven't made back Robert fucking Duvall's salary for Tender Mercies. But it's your movie. You go make it. And I thought, wow, what he's really saying is it's your job. You go lose it. But I reported to Tom, well, it turns out that his mafia contact heard about this, and he decided he was co-author of the treatment. So we had to make the deal with the two of them. So I have to meet with this guy for lunch, and he pulls up to the studio in his white Rolls Royce. He gets out in his ice cream suit. He's as white as he is tall, and he talks like this. Okay. Talk about typecasting. Call up central casting, you couldn't do as well.
Right.
anyhow, have lunch, and I explained to him that we have a green light. We're going ahead with the screenplay, but it's with a proviso, and that is that we can't have any of the original cast except Al Pacino. And this guy looks at me in silence, and he says, "Well, Dan, you remember that line in Godfather 3 about making you an offer you can't refuse? I like ours." And all right, in Godfather 1, excuse me. "I like ours in Godfather 3. If I can't deal with you, I'll deal with your estate." He's threatening to have me rubbed out over casting. Well, fortunately, I got a call from Jeff Katzenberg over at Disney offering me a 3-picture deal, which I grabbed.
I don't blame you.
Let Don Steele deal with
with the
yes.
heavy weight.
So there you have it. That's what story editors do, story analysts do. I had a lot of fun at it. I really did.
I bet so. I bet so. So it's very obvious that you're a creative type person. And so you've gone from doing that to being an author. So how do you find that experience similar or different?
From being an editor?
Yes.
Oh, it's a lot different. As an editor, you're dealing with words that are already on the page. As a writer, you got to fill that blank page. You got to put them on that page. You got to get, in the case of a screenplay in those days, from page 120 to from page 1 to 120. These days, it's more like, well, then it dropped down to page 110. Today it's 100. You figure one minute on the screen to a single page. A little more for action scenes, a little less for dialogue. And filling those pages is not an easy task. I had a method I would with my screenplays, and very much the same thing with my novels. I would research the hell out of things. I would go to the place that the story was to take place. I would interview and hang out with as many of the individuals who lived and worked there as I possibly could. I would live in the basement of the UCLA library, reading and reading and reading. I would do character sketches and outlines, and then I'd put it all away. I'd go to this little boat. We had a little cabin cruiser that we kept at Channel Islands Harbor, and I would walk the beach until the characters started to talk to me. I carried a small tape recorder. We didn't have phones that would take care of that in those days. I was well known as that crazy guy who walks the beach talking to himself. And I'd come back and transcribe everything to the computer, noting that when I did the female characters, it sounded a lot like Norman Bates doing his mother. And then at the end of the day, if I'd come up with several scenes, I would then transcribe. I started with yellow legal pads, and then I'd transcribe from the legal pads to the computers. After that, hardly ever changed. But it was a very, very different experience from having all those words to start with. You have to come up with them yourself, and it's not always an easy journey.
No, and it's also very different. I know from talking to other screenwriters and novelists that, in the movie industry, it's a collaborative effort, whether you want it to be or not, but it is. There are lots of people putting input in. There are lots of people who have ideas they want to bring to the table. So it is a huge collaborative effort. Whereas for most writers, they sit in a room by themselves for the majority of the time, and they have to bring their own inspiration. But I also think that you also then, if there's some kind of dialogue that's been noodling in the back of your mind that you think, you know what, I would like to do this differently, then you get that opportunity to have the same dialogue that maybe you've heard on a movie or somebody else has said at a party, but you get to change it to Dan's way.
Yes, you're in charge.
which is both daunting and satisfying, I think, at the same time.
It is. there were times when I was homicidal when I saw what they were doing to my work. As a matter of fact, there's a guy at HBO. There was a point where I was ready, and I'm not a violent person. I was ready to leap across his desk, take him by the shoulders, and slam his head against the wall. I was so angry at what he was doing to my song.
Right.
What have they done to my song? Well, they did it to me again and again and again. Uh, it's a very, very difficult thing. I I had the only time that they actually shot everything that I mean, I had Michael Bean, who's one of Jim Cameron's actors, doing one of my cable films, and he has a lousy memory. So he paraphrases the dialogue that I agonized over for months. Oh, oh,
Yes.
it's just amazing the things that. But I, I once got very, very lucky in that I was able to be the dialogue. They shot my script because I was there on the set every day, every hour, at the arm of the director, who became a great buddy of mine. Uh, and I served as the dialogue police. But the great thing was, many of the actors came up and thanked me for the dialogue. Uh, but yeah, making movies is creativity by committee, by massive committee, as you point out. I mean, it's just amazing how many people have a say in what goes on. And I read and recommended a number of screenplays that ultimately got made, but the only one that ended up as good as the screenplay, not better, as good as the screenplay, was Witness. Uh, they shot the script. There was only one change, and it was a good one. It was not huge, but it was a good one. Let's see. I think that is the only one that really took you where the screenplay took you. It's just, and the reason is obvious.
Yeah, I love
Any
that.
movie that gets made is a miracle. The good one's the second coming. I mean,
precisely. I agree. I mean, there are things that I'm like, I will leave a theater or watch at home, and I think, oh, okay, they chose to do it that way. And you have. I mean, I think when it comes to a movie, even reading a novel, you've sort of got to suspend your internal beliefs, because you're not making this creative thing. So when I read a book, I have to trust the author is going to give me what I need, and I have to go along with it. And I'll give you a compliment, because it's tough for me living in Los Angeles to read a lot of books about Los Angeles, because I'm very direction oriented. I have like a GPS up my behind, so it comes natural to me. God help you if you make a wrong turn, because I am going to see it. Now, it isn't to say that I don't keep my mouth shut, because I'm never going to say, "Oh my gosh, you made a wrong turn," because there is creative license. I learned that from Sue Grafton, who said, "Don't send me any letters telling me about how this road goes. I did it my way because that's what I wanted it to do. It's important to the story, but I understand the road runs in the other direction in real life." So, I mean, I do get it that sometimes there is creative license, but I did enjoy your descriptions of Los Angeles and Malibu, Santa Monica. These are places that I've seen often and a lot, having lived here for 25 years. And it was really interesting, because it's very obvious you did a lot of research on things that were popular during that period. So now I think we should get into talking about Shout at the Devil. So tell us a little bit about Jack Shannon, who he is and what he does in your novel.
Well, Jack and the series of stories, something that I started thinking about in the late 90s. Didn't get around to them for quite a little while, but I often wondered what it would have been like to work in the studio system back in the heyday of the studio system. And then I got to thinking, the really interesting period is the post-war period. The studios are at their peak of power at the beginning of the war. And in post-war come the Paramount consent decrees, which robbed them of their distribution system, the rise of television, the stars' unwillingness to sign contracts anymore. Uh, so by the mid 50s, the studios were really no longer the studios. They were shadows, ghosts of their former selves. So there's a tremendous amount of change going on, and change creates conflict, and conflict is drama. So that's why the stories are set back in 1947, 1951. The next will be 1953. As for Jack, I I don't know. I got obsessed with the idea of someone who was on the verge of stardom being plucked out of Hollywood and sent off to Europe to war. And I I read about a lot of Hollywood folks who did go to war. There's matter of fact, there's a good book called Five Came Back, about major directors who, like John Huston, who John Ford. I mean, John Ford was actually wounded making one of these combat documentaries.
Wow.
And the fact that John Wayne did not go to war and yet became everyone in America's image of the war hero, it came between him and his big star. There was a very rocky period. At any rate, I read heavily about them. I I got to ask myself, what would happen if you had someone who had worked his way up to the verge of stardom, only to have the war break out, volunteer, see D-Day, the freeing of D-Day, the Battle of the Bulge, and the freeing of the death camps, comes back physically and emotionally scarred. I thought of him as carrying a cane and limping, but I later came up with the scar that just clearly put an end in those days
Sure.
to his Hollywood career. What happens to this guy? How does he remain in Hollywood? And I came up with the idea, well, the studio took pity upon him, made him a publicist, where his job was to suppress the bad behavior of the star, to suppress publicity. And he's great at it because as a result of his war experiences, he doesn't care. He can't care about anything until he's assigned the care and feeding of Savannah Stevens, who is the studio's sex pot star, and who is nothing but trouble. She shows up late every day to the set if she shows up at all. She insists on 50 takes of every shot. She wanders on. Well, he starts to care. He starts to care about her, and then she disappears, and he has to find her entirely on his own. He can't enlist the help of the police. No one must know because the future of the studio depends upon it. That's the setup in the first one. And the second one finds him as a result of his having stood up for what was right, for his having tried to do something right in a town full of wrong. He's now consigned to movie hell. He's working on Poverty Row, cranking out these 6-day wonders as a stunt man and a stunt double. And then once again, his co-star from that movie that should have made him a star, she really did become a star. She comes to him for help. It seems that what she was struggling to survive on the streets of Hollywood as a very young, lonely woman. She made a porno film, and it has resurfaced, and she's being blackmailed, and she begs him to help her, and he tries. That's the setup. And I find both of them very moving characters. I care about Jack. Matter of fact, one of the things, I spend most of my time alone, as you pointed out, in a room, and yet I feel my life has been richly peopled by these characters who speak to me, and they speak, these two in particular speak to me in very profound ways, as do several of them. There's the there's Jake, uh, the guy who owns a newsstand and lost his legs in World War II. There's the female impersonator. Uh, these people move me, and one of the reasons I write.
Well, and I think one of the things, Dan, you've done is you've given in Jack a character that the audience can really root for. And I think, I'm fortunate. I think fortunate is the right word, because I'm young enough not to have been drafted. My dad was almost drafted to Korea, but he was deemed to have flat feet. And my dad, just like me, has these enormous arches. So I don't really know exactly how. They said he had flat feet, but he didn't go to Korea. And I can honestly say, I don't think my dad, who was such a gentle spirit, would have made it through Korea, because it takes a certain personality to be able to go to war. It's not free and it's not easy. And here comes Jack back to Hollywood with all these scars on the inside as well as on the outside. And you give us a character that we understand his demons. I mean, you chose for Jack to have nightmares, which I think it gives us a side of Jack that we see the humanity in Jack, because he tried to care. He tried to do the right thing, and yet he's come back scarred. And so you give us I didn't look at Jack as a down and out character. I looked at Jack as someone who's had a station higher before, but who's still making a good go of his life as best he can, and he's not giving up. And I like that, because you can get behind Jack and say, well, I hope one day he'll kick life the way life has kicked him.
Yeah, he's trying to do the right thing. He's trying to do good in a totally corrupt world. And yeah, you got to be. I'm with him.
Yeah, so am I. And of course, and on a different note, I loved Myra. Myra is everything Dan would be if Dan had Myra's job. I would be the exact same as Myra. Myra was a great deal of fun to read. I mean, so the audience knows, she is a supreme smartass. So it's just like, I'm not sure that.
I'm not sure where she came from. My wife would probably say she came directly from me.
That's okay, Dan. That's all right. I'm right there with you. It must be the name, I guess.
I guess. I don't know. I'm really glad you liked her.
I did, because I think when you have stories that are dark, there has to be someone along the way who brings a little light and a little levity, and something that you can sort of snicker at and say, "Oh Lord," you roll your eyes, because every time Myra appears, there's going to be something snarky out of Myra's mouth. It's just going to happen.
Yeah.
But it brings some light into what is otherwise perhaps a darker story.
Yeah. Well, I tried to inject as much humor as I possibly can. And I pretty much live the same way.
Yeah.
But I've been through some pretty dark times in Hollywood, but I always managed to find some way to laugh at them. Matter of fact, that's my memoir, Confessions of a Hollywood Nobody. It's sort of a funny, excuse me, survivor's guide to Hollywood. And that's something I miss in a lot of mysteries.
I agree. And Hollywood is a tough row to hoe, but some people make a great go of it. And it is really and truly the entertainment capital of the world. And it is what we need as people. We need entertainment. So I think you've certainly done this with Shout at the Devil. So will there be a third Jack Shannon?
Yeah, well, if I live that long, yeah.
Well, I hope you live that long, Dan. I have a new friend, so I don't want you to go anywhere just yet.
Well, you notice that the cover of the first novel is black and charcoal. Get the same image in the cover of the second one in shades of blue. Cover of the third will be in shades of red. Nice. It will include the Red Scare. It will include the blacklist. There's a reference to it in this one with Eva Wilde. Um, I'm just in the very, very early stages. I've always conceived of it as a trilogy, and what I wanted to do was track the dissolution of the studio system. I really want the series to end with the end of the studios. So yes.
Good, good. Well, I look forward to it. Thank you so much for joining me today, Dan. This has been a great deal of fun.
Well, it's been great for me too. Thank you.
Thank you. Hang on for me just a second.
Sure.
Thank you for joining me for this week's episode of Out with Dan. You can find more information about this podcast and its host at OutWithDan.com, on Twitter at OutWithDan, and on Instagram and Facebook at GoOutWithDan. This podcast is hosted by Authors on the Air Global Radio Network, and the theme music is provided by bensound.com. Join us again soon for the next episode of Out with Dan.